and it's just other games. That's all we sort of do is recycle, and in part that limits the creativity, also limits the innovation. And so Eric, to me, is an indie that really demonstrates this kind of being inspired, being well cultured, pulling in inspiration from different areas, and kind of interpolating or extracting what's interesting from architecture or the music industry, and sort of pulling that in and sort of twisting it and doing something different, whether that's technologically speaking, whether it's design-oriented, or whether it's business-oriented. So I think it's really important, and certainly as students, to not become too narrowly focused just on gaming, but to really have a wide funnel and be inspired by many different inputs. So that would be another habit we see from successful indies. All right, anybody know who these guys are? Who? Brave. Who said that? And? Jonathan Blow, yeah, the movie star. Yeah, Jonathan Blow and Chris Hecker. So Jonathan Blow famously was the one who made Braid. And I don't know if it made its way over here, but Indie Game the movie. Has anyone seen that? Indie Game the movie? All right, super cool documentary. And so John was featured in the Indie Game the movie. Chris Hecker is not a movie star like John, but a very famous longtime indie. These two were the first ones to do a game jam. How many of the students participated in the global game jam that was hosted? So a few of you. You should all be doing that. That was what, 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? So the first game jam was them two and a few other friends in a barn outside of San Francisco a couple of weeks before the big GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. And they were at the time all working on big projects. Chris actually used to work at Microsoft for a while. And they said, what if we sort of only took a weekend? I think it wasn't 48 hours, I think it was a bit longer than that. But we only had a few days, and we were going to create stuff. I mean, much like the context of a game jam, where you have 48 hours, a theme, to just be creative and innovate without a worry about marketing and business and all this kind of stuff. And so they went off in this barn for a couple of days and generated a few games. And then they presented those, call them experiments or prototypes, at GDC the following week. And I think this was around 2001 or 2002, I don't remember exactly. And so that was the first time there was what's called the experimental gameplay session at GDC. And since then, every year there's been this sort of experimental game session where developers are presenting really rough prototypes and sort of wacky concepts. And it was them too that sort of drove that. To me, the lesson that I take away from that is this idea of failure, or in many ways sort of persistence. That when you're creating something new, when you're trying to discover what's going to succeed in the marketplace, you have to be ready and willing to fail. Right? Nobody knows what the next Angry Birds is going to be. Like, who knew that Flappy Birds was going to be, anything, and yet, it's making, like, if I showed you Flappy Birds, would you have said, oh yeah, this is going to make millions? No, or even the Angry Birds. Right? People have a near impossible time predicting what's actually going to succeed in the marketplace. And so you have to, as an indie, as a creator, you have to have a resilience or persistence because you're going to fail a lot. Right? Your first game is probably not going to do well, but that's okay if you treat it as a learning experience. Or if you see each game as an experience to learn to improve the next time, and then it's just a question of surviving so you can do it the next time, then you're going to do well. Now, of course, we also want to make money and all those other things, but that may not happen the first time out. So all the students, your chances of success when you get out of school is very, very low, which means you have to be okay with failure. And then the other element to that is you have to fail fast. Right? And as indies and as startups, the faster you can fail, the faster you can move on to the next thing, and the faster you learn. So you have to, as counterintuitive as it may sound, you have to fail as fast as possible and as much as possible and survive each failure so you can take the learnings of that failure and do the next thing. And so to me, John and Chris sort of embody this notion of learning from failure and founding the sort of the root of what has become the Global Game Jam, which is 20,000 developers around the globe failing a whole bunch over one weekend. But you don't consider it failure, right? You consider it as fun. You consider it as you're exploring and trying. And most of the games that use the Global Game Jam are complete crap. You have a few gems, but the point is not that they're crap or not. It's that you're experimenting. You're trying things. You're working on new concepts. And so, anyway, so Chris and John really embody that for me. Anyone know who this is? Who is it? Yeah. So it's Kelly Santiago from Kelly Santiago from or was from That Game Company that did Flow and Flower and more recently Journey and Beautiful, a masterpiece. Really a wonderful game. And Kelly was one of the co-founders along with Genova Chen being the creative director. So Kelly was more the manager, sort of business production person. And Genova and Kelly and a few others actually came out of universities. They were very famous in the sense that they were they were funded by Sony pretty much even before they graduated. They were at one of the very famous schools in the U.S. called USC, the University of Southern California. There's a very strong game program, master's level program, and Kelly, Genova, and a few others created Flow within their school programs. And then Sony saw them and said, "You guys are amazing." And they signed them up to a three-game deal, which was then Flow, Flower, and Journey. But Kelly's background is not business. She's not a manager type person. She's not someone that normally wears a suit. But she had a great quote once saying that the business side of things is just another problem to solve. Right? She says more of an engineering kind of logical mind. And she says, I didn't think I'd be good at the business side, the management side, but then I just said, well, it's just another problem I need to solve. And I think she also said like it's like a game, right? You're trying to win a game that has these rules of winning success, and I'm trying to win a game of business. And certainly for people who generally don't have backgrounds or experience on the business side of things, rather than be overwhelmed, just sort of, if you're a programmer, just sort of break it down and do an if loop on the tasks that you have to do or the challenges that you have. And so I thought it was good that she had done so well, but really had no experience or previous knowledge of what she was doing, and yet just sort of took this like, well, it's just another problem, right? We deal with challenges, massive computational problems, or artistic challenges, design challenges. Well, this is just another challenge, and I'm gonna attack and do my best. So again, the game industry, a lot of the indies that are successful are like that. Right? They're like you. They're programmers and artists and designers. They don't have business background, but they sort of tackle it with sort of that kind of attitude. Well, geez, someone's got to do it. I'm going to put on the suit, and I'm just going to sort of deal with this like any other problem I'm going to deal with. And so Kelly sort of resonates to me with that. Now she's actually head of developer relations at Ouya, the micro console, the Android-based console. So she's working on that. All right, the next one is the idea of mentorship, or the idea that you're kind of clueless. When I put up, oh man, crap, this is horrible. So the Canadian government is actually doing something called the CTA, which is what does the T stand for? Canadian Technology Accelerator in India, where they're doing an exchange. A handful of Canadian companies are going to come to India to explore and learn how the market works here, and a handful of Indian companies. I mean, this is technology in general, not just specific to games per se. We'll go to Canada to look at opportunities and learn and be mentored, and because everyone's kind of clueless for something. GSF, so I put that up there just because I was in Delhi last week to speak at the GSF conference, what I think is super powerful with what GSF is doing is really a mentorship-based initiative. Right? You have entrepreneurs that are coming, that want funding, that are working on creative, novel technologies and startups, and yet they don't have the background for that. And so what GSF does really is wrap them with that kind of expertise to help those entrepreneurs, those brave men and women who are jumping in to be a startup, to hopefully not make all of the mistakes that we made before. I think in talking to Rajesh here, the idea of Game Tantra, I should have put the logo for Game Tantra up there as well. A big part of it is the idea of sharing that knowledge, sharing that experience, so that the startups have a leg up, that they don't make all the same failures, they don't burn the same time. I think to a certain extent, because games don't have the same legitimacy as going off to be an engineer or a doctor, everyone in this room is has a bit of that courage. Because how many of you, your parents are like, why are you doing this? Like, go get a real job. Go do something that's meaningful. And so already everyone in this room is, a little bit courageous, has that bravery to kind of pursue their dreams. And if we, whether it's stuff like the accelerator program, whether it's stuff like GSF, whether it's stuff like Execution Labs or Game Tantra, this idea of sharing, of mentoring, of helping each other out. I see that on a global scale, and that kind of goes back to my earlier comments about building a successful community. That will help all of us, right? When one game company succeeds and does well, then it's that much easier for the next company to succeed and do well. If one studio, one team is funded by some angel investors, it's in everyone's best interest for them to succeed. Because if they fail, then the angel investor will say, oh, well, I guess games are not for me. And I gave these guys some money, I looked them in the eye, I thought they were going to be the next Angry Birds, they didn't pull it off, and why didn't go back to funding ITC companies and medical whatever nonsense. And so in that sense, even though it was these three guys that got the money, as a community, we need to do everything we can so they don't screw it up for the rest of us. All right, so it's on you guys. And so that's why I say, it's because it's such a nascent sector, it's important for everyone to help each other out, give advice, provide feedback, share your ideas, participate in things that provide direct mentorship ability. There's even the NASCOM, with the 10,000 Startups program, that also is very much geared towards mentorship and sharing, and I believe in that a lot. So these are just a couple of examples of those things. But it starts with you admitting that you're clueless. Right? It's not an ego thing. Even though you're super talented, you may be the best artist in the country, you may be the best programmer, we all kind of have no clue what we're doing. And so, drop the ego, accept that you don't have all the answers, ask others that have had sort of similar challenges, get that feedback, get that input. And likewise, if you've had some experiences, be willing to share with each other so that we can all succeed together. All right. I think I ran through 7. And just as a highlight, or a recap, what do we say? So wear the suit, right? Which means someone has to play the business role. What else? Always be selling, and by selling I mean telling your story, sharing your vision, bringing champions on board with you, get people excited about what you're doing. Selling, I don't mean here's my product, give me $1. It really just means selling yourself, selling your story. Make money and don't be afraid to make money. There's nothing shameful in making money. We covered that, of course. Well played and well cultured. This was Eric Zimmerman, where really you have to have a wide funnel and sort of accept all kinds of other experiences as inputs so that your design, your art, your code is that much more sort of diverse and interesting and compelling. 5, fearless resilience, being willing to fail, always getting back up. Failure is not a negative. Failure is just a form of learning. It's the most important kind of learning. Then Kelly, with her quote about the business as a game process to solve just another problem to work on. Again, sort of an attitude question of attitude. And then in your clueless, ask for help, seek mentorship, get involved in the community, get involved in the GSF and Game Tantra and 10,000 startups and all these, the CTA applied for. I mean, get involved in these kind of things and don't be shy. Just as a side note, the person who wears the suit, often half of your job will be not in the studio, right? Not in production. A big part of your job is to get out there, to intersect with investors, other developers, other executives, seeking help and support and sort of selling the vision and all these kind of things. You can't do that in front of a keyboard. You can do some of it on Twitter or whatever, but you've got to get outside, you have to go to events, you have to participate in the community to give back, but also to receive the help. So you got to get out there and ask for the help. And then as a bonus habit, of course, you still have to make great games. If your games suck, all of the rest doesn't matter. So, yeah, you still obviously, amongst all these challenges of being an entrepreneur, a startup, making money and being cultural, all these kind of things, at the end of the day, you still have to make a good game and have the skills, the experience, the training, the knowledge to make a good game. So, all the business stuff is meaningless if when you're producing at the end of the day it's crap. So you still have to hit that kind of baseline of building something that's fun before you really worry about all the rest. Now, it could be that what you have is not great yet, and you're working towards greatness, and then because you're out there getting help and learning and bringing people in on your vision, then you go from not so great to something great. Right? I mean, you have to be on that path, you have to be on that journey to greatness. And from the business side of view, these sort of other 7 things are things that we have seen, or I've seen that successful indies have all exhibited in one form or another. Some of them are more easy to accomplish. Some of them it's just a mindset shift and an attitude shift. And there you go. Those are my 7+1 tips on how to be a successful indie developer. Thank you very much. For Q&A, I'm happy to respond to any challenges to the seven tips or questions about the business stuff. But I mean, I've done all kinds of things in the game industry. So if you have other elements that don't necessarily touch on this, you're welcome to really just sort of ask me anything you want. So, all right. Is there another mic maybe so we can run around, or is there another microphone?
Okay, I'm Joseph. We're a video game recruitment company here, but we've had a go at making our own first game. And with relevance to that, we're also opening up wider for everyone here. It seems a lot of the industries now move to the free-to-play model, and I wondered what comments you would have on the importance of that, and maybe people making games, whether they should target that model rather than the old, more traditional ones. And if you do go in that direction, what strategies do you have towards monetizing free-to-play games?
Good set of questions. So, definitely we're seeing the shift, as he says, to mobile and in particular mobile games using a free-to-play monetization strategy. And certainly in much of the world, that's the big sort of trend that's happening. It's not an easy one. For developers and designers, the idea of designing the fun gameplay as well as putting in compelling monetization features and how do I hook a player, it's challenging. It's challenging just purely from a design point of view. It's also challenging from a technical point of view because now you're not just making an executable. You have to make the server that then hosts the users, that then tracks the transactions, or knows who's playing the game and which friends are connected to Facebook that you're showing on the map. But there's all these other things that if you're just making a cool little game as an executable, you wouldn't have to worry about all this other stuff. So there's definitely challenges for a small, 3, 4, 5 person team to just execute on all those things that are needed to do these kinds of games. From a business model point of view, I believe that free-to-play is really the future of the industry. Now, it may not look exactly how it looks now, and I think we're already, the sort of textbook example is the Zynga model of kind of abusive or exploitive techniques, kind of energy meters, appointment mechanics, so the Pavlovian psychology, where people really don't see that as a meaningful game experience. And I think we're starting to mature away from those kind of mechanics. If you look at League of Legends, it's a little more sophisticated type of, it's still free to play, right? You can still play the game for free. But when people pay money in there, it's because they want to, because they enjoy it, they feel good about it, they don't feel exploited. Clash of Clans is certainly probably a better model than Zynga's time. So I think it's evolving and maturing, and I'm certainly appreciating that designers are taking different approaches and experimenting. But in India, it's difficult. It's important on one hand because with making the games available for free, it certainly increases the amount of downloads, it's sort of barrier to entry. But then conversion to paying users within a free game is very difficult because most people don't have credit cards. The payment and processing systems are not really well established. Google doesn't have a contract, whatever, with the carrier. There's all this kind of friction in the model. So it's difficult to take that path and generate revenue in India because of this friction in the system. But I would challenge that most studios here should be thinking of a global market.